Hi everyone, I'm Celeste. Welcome to my BookTube channel. Well, I am so happy that I decided to read about animal tales in the month of May. I also really enjoyed reading James Herriot's books again. It was just such a rewarding, rich experience. He is such a talented memoirist. He has kind of a dry style in which he's sort of his prose makes it seem like he's keeping a straight face as he's telling you these hysterically funny stories about his first days as a veterinarian. And his stories for children are equally marvelous. And if you haven't seen it, I do strongly, strongly recommend James Herriot's Treasury for children. There are well-known stories like Moses the Kitten. There's Moses the Kitten there. The illustrations are beautifully done. They're very warm and they evoke just such a nostalgic, rustic charm. There's one with cows and geese. Just lovely, just beautiful, and country fairs, and inside his veterinary practice with Siegfried. So I strongly, strongly recommend this book if you can get it, and the hardcover is a really super nice edition. And then I also really enjoyed my reread dipping into All Creatures Great and Small. I love the new miniseries on public television. I've been watching that. It often makes me cry at the end of the episodes because it's just so touching and so heartwarming. And you can, with that series, you can really just feel the love. And I've enjoyed listening to it on Audible as well, because it's narrated by the gentleman who stars as James Herriot in the new series. His name is Nicholas Ralph. He has kind of a Scottish brogue, and it's just wonderful the way he narrates James Herriot's adventures. I particularly, I think, enjoyed revisiting some of the stories about how James Herriot was trying to become accepted by the local inhabitants, his neighbors. And one incident in particular was really funny, where he was trying to help with a horse, and the horse sort of lifted him up in his clothes, and he was kind of hanging, suspended in the air like that, and the farmer kept saying, let him go, and put him down. And it was really, really good. He's sort of a storyteller like no other, and you really need to just dive into his prose and you will become lost in the farmland and the hills and the dales and the fells. He tells the tale with restraint is what I guess I'm trying to say, and it ends up just being so hilariously funny. So I've really enjoyed dipping into that again. And then I just wanted to briefly share 3 other books with you which I'm looking forward to reading. One I've already read many times, but I just found this copy of Charlotte's Web by E.B. White, and I don't believe my son has ever read this, and I think this would be a marvelous one for us to take on together, because we love to read books together and take turns reading chapters out loud. So I really think he would enjoy this, because we do live right behind the farm. And actually just today we were out there and saw the cows, which are now out in the fields, and the geese and the sheep and the little goats as well, the little black and white goats. There's even a donkey over there and some cats and a rooster. So all of the barnyard accompaniment, but it's lovely to see the cows out in the field again. I just love that. And when they're calving, it's even more beautiful. Ironically, sometimes they calve at night, And so if you're walking along the road or driving by, you'll see a new calf in the field under the moonlight with its mother next to it. And it's just a magical sight. But in any event, this is a wonderful book. Again, this is another one which blends very large concepts, scary concepts to a child, but does it in such a loving way that it's manageable. Stories of loss and threat of loss and love and companionship and who your found family is. So that's one that I'm looking forward to revisiting at some point. And then this book is one that I just came across recently, and I did start to read it. I have not finished it yet. But it is a brand new book, and it is called Sipsworth by Simon van Booy. So far, it is absolutely charming. I'm not very far in. I'm about that far in so far. But I will read you what it says in the front cover here. I actually learned about this book from watching a video done by the author Ann Patchett. And she is the author of Tom Lake and many other books. And she recommended reading Sipsworth. And first of all, look at the cover art on this. It's an elderly lady looking out of her front door. And there it is on the front. I loved it, Ann Patchett. So I'll read you what's on the front flap here. Following the loss of her husband and son, Helen Cartwright returns to the village of her childhood after living abroad for 6 decades. Her only wish is to die quickly and without fuss. She retreats into her home on Westminster Crescent, becoming a creature of routine and habit. Each day was an impersonation of the one before, with only a slight shuffle, as though even for death there is a cue. Then one cold winter night, a chance encounter with a mouse sets Helen on a surprising journey. Sipsworth is a reminder that there can be second chances. No matter what we have planned for ourselves, sometimes life has plans of its own. With profound compassion, Simon van Booy illuminates not only a deep friendship forged between 2 lonely creatures, but the reverberations of goodness that ripple out of that from a unique bond. I think this would be a marvelous book to read in the autumn. It seems sort of cold and bleak. And at the beginning of this book, it is rather somber and serious. This is a very lonely woman. She has lost her husband and her son. She's all alone. And these are the thoughts that she has musing as she walks around her house, fills her day, and, goes out for little walks and things like that. But then suddenly everything changes, and it is about her time with a little mouse. And I think when I do read Sipsworth, which will probably be in the fall, I will share a story of something that happened recently to me and my encounter with a little mouse. I think I'll save it for then. But in any event, and the author, Simon van Booy, I'll just show you his little bio there. He sounds like a wonderful guy. He's the award-winning best-selling author of more than a dozen books for adults and children. He's written for The Times, The Financial Times, The Guardian, The Telegraph, The Washington Post, and the BBC's. He was raised in Wales, and he currently lives between London and New York, where he is also a book editor and a volunteer emergency medical technician for Central Park Medical Unit. So he sounds like he knows how to write about compassion, and which as well was in great part what Thomasina dealt with. So I am super, super looking forward to continuing Sipsworth. I was recently given a book by my good friend Mary, and Mary was actually a well-known and highly accredited microbiologist, and is an author. And she lives down near Keuka Lake, where I used to have a cottage, and I've shared footage with you of Keuka Lake. In any event, she recently gifted me this book by Dave Eggers called The Eyes and the Impossible. But it's just an absolutely gorgeous hardcover. I believe this is another book which anthropomorphizes the voices of the animals and has them speak for themselves as characters. I don't know much about this book. Now, I have read one other book by Dave Eggers. It was for adults, and it was called What is the What, which blew my mind. It was so good. I just kept shaking my head like this as I read each page of What is the What, because I was so blown away by it. This is a children's book. I am really looking forward to this, and again, this is another one which, along with Sipsworth, I hope to read in the fall, and it has a very fallish looking cover, doesn't it? Equally wonderful as the story of a veterinarian in a very picturesque location is Paul Gallico's Thomasina. And this was kind of my featured book of the month this month. And I did want to chat with you about it today. It's very informal. I had invited some of you to read along as well. Anyone who happened to pick up a copy was welcome to join in. I do apologize for not making it more formal in terms of being like a book club reading or anything like that, but I just wanted to keep it sort of casual and non-committal because I didn't want to pressure anybody, but I did want to invite you to read it along with me, because both this book and the Disney movie, which is available for free right here on YouTube, are just both magical. And I can't begin to tell you how much I've enjoyed watching the movie and reading this book by Paul Gallico. I absolutely love how Paul Gallico is able to evoke such unique worlds in each of his novels. We have Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, and in that book he evokes the world of a London charwoman going from house to house in her humble way, cleaning as she goes, but also the couture fashion of the House of Dior in Paris, and high society there, and the flats of people on the up and up, and the young lovers strolling by the Seine. He's able to evoke a very different world with a very different voice in each of his novels, and he's just such a talented author. He's quickly become one of my favorites, and I can't wait to read more by him, actually. But in the case of Thomasina, the veterinarian is Mr. McDewey, and he's kind of a surly individual. He's very curt. He has had loss in his life. He has lost his wife. He has one little girl, one daughter named Mary Rua, and that is Mary with the red hair. And so Mary Rua has a cat named Thomasina, and unfortunately Thomasina becomes sick and has a fall. The father, Mr. McDewey, although he does care and does have compassion in his own way, he sort of likes to emotionally distance himself from caring too much about anything. And so more often than not, he's a little bit quick to condemn the animal and say it won't survive. And so because of that, it will seem as though all is lost in this book, and it's very sad. It's just the way Paul Gallico can blend the bitter and the sweet is just chef's kiss. It's just wonderful. You have to experience it for yourself. You really need to read it because he honors the worldview of a small child. But at the same time, he's just so talented at allowing you to see some mirth in the world at the same time and some humor. And that is what life is, isn't it? It's a mingling of the bitter and the sweet. The tale takes place in a village near a loch in Scotland. And again, Paul Gallico just paints such a beautiful world for the reader. In fact, I just want to give you an example of his prose. I'm going to read you a description from Thomasina. And it will just give you an idea of how talented Paul Gallico is with language in allowing us to see where Mr. McDougall and his daughter Mary Rua live. The morning was misty, and the smell of salt mingled with coal and peat smoke was in the air from the breakfast fires as Mr. McDougall drove through the streets of grey stone or whitewashed houses, tall, narrow, and slate-roofed, down to the quay where the waters of the loch were grey too, and a blue fishing boat with a stumpy mast and the forward well loaded with lobster pots, floats, and gear chuffed out of the harbor. The veterinary breathed the smell of mingled sea and land, wild sea and rugged woodland and man and habitation smells with no particular enjoyment, nor did he look to the flight of gulls or the curl of the tide lapping the shore, the beauty of the blue boat on the grey mirror of the loch in the pearly morning mist already shot through with the light of the mounting sun was lost upon him. He turned the jeep northwards onto the Cairndow road, crossing the river Ardrath by the old Saddleback Bridge, and when he reached Creemore, took the left fork up into the hills. It's so evocative, and it's the entire novel is like this. There is beauty all around Mr. McDougall, but because of his grief and his inconsolable longing for the way his life had been and mourning for what he thought it was going to be, he just can't see it, even though all the little children around him and the other residents can. I also love how Paul Gallico uses anthropomorphic animal voices in the story, particularly the voice of Thomasina, and it's just so funny the way she speaks, and she's rather haughty, and especially after certain events happen, she is under the impression that she is an Egyptian queen of old with great power, and she speaks as though she's an Egyptian queen and kind of like incantations and spells and things, and it's just hysterical. It's really adorable. She's very full of herself, I do have to say, and she and Mr. McDougall are kind of sworn enemies. They don't really like each other. Mary Rua is sort of the cog of the wheel in between Thomasina and Mr. McDougall, but Thomasina and Mr. McDougall don't like each other very much. And ironically, Mr. McDougall is a bit similar. He can also be sarcastic and haughty and self-important and all of that. So, yeah. Also, we come to meet a witch in the story. She is supposedly the red-headed witch of Ardrath, and her name is Daft Laurie, and she is very much in tune with nature and wild animals, and she and Andrew befriend each other and begin to save animals together, some that have been caught in traps and so on, others that have been injured. So yeah, I think all of the best writers can make you feel happiness, sadness, joy, sorrow. It's all kind of mingled together, tragedy, comedy, and Paul Gallico is definitely one of the writers who can do that. As we progress through the story, we really start to see the major themes emerge, and I think one of the main ones is loss and redemption. There's a little bit of a religious message in this book, but it's not it doesn't overwhelm the text, and it doesn't preach at you. It's very mildly done. It's sort of whispered and suggested in the background, which I found lovely. And it is profound in some ways as well. Because it makes you think about creation and life and loss and finding your way back when you've lost it. There's a lot going on here. I can't tell you too much about the central plot because that would give a lot away. So it's kind of frustrating to do a book review or to sort of meet with you here to discuss the book because in a sense I can't really tell you what happens because it would really just give too much away. But suffice it to say that Paul Gallico is able to present a character like Andrew McDewey, who's gruff and thinks he knows it all and is bitter and callous and hardened against the world. But what you really see is he's protecting a very vulnerable heart. And he needs to bring back the heart of his little girl and let her have faith in things again after certain events happen in the book. And you'll feel tenderness and pain and joy all mingled together at the same time, and humor. There's parts of it which are really, really humorous, and the descriptions of nature are gorgeous. I do want to say, in the interest of fair criticism, this book was written in mid-20th century, I think in the 1950s, and it's very typical of the writing of that time in terms of its tendency to have a little bit of racism and to stereotype particular marginalized groups of people. In this case, it's the Romani. I think it's called the Romani. They're the gypsies who are itinerant and move around. And there is a band of gypsies in this. It's sort of like a traveling carnival. And it's tough because on the one hand, Paul Gallico evokes that carny atmosphere so well and makes it very mysterious and kind of dark, kind of sinister. There's a little bit of magic. There are also mistreated animals, however. And so, you know, I'm all for him depicting the cruelty to the animals and the desire of Mr. McDewey to stop it and the desire of Laurie to stop it. But, you know, they're kind of, the Romani are kind of stereotyped in this, you know, so there's this sort of typical stereotype of a gypsy. So that was a little bit problematic, but it does need to be put within the context of the time it was written in. I think if this same story were written today, Paul Gallico would be a bit more sensitive to his portrayal in that regard. And I think he was a talented enough writer that he would be able to retain all of the magic and dark intrigue of that, but sort of leave the stereotyping out of it. And perhaps some of the people in the caravan would not be gypsies, you know, they would just be people. But in any event, that was the one thing that would stop me from giving it like 5+ stars. I would give it like 4.9 stars, because otherwise it was just brilliant and magical. So let me know what you thought of this book, or if you plan on reading it in the future, in case you haven't had a chance to get to it yet. I really encourage you to pick this book up. I don't see it discussed too much here on BookTube, and lots of times when I pick up a book that I'm reading to share with you, I'm concerned that maybe, oh gosh, this is already made the rounds so many times, everybody's discussed this book, but this time I don't think that's the case. I haven't seen too many people discussing Thomasina, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what some of you think of it as well, and of other Paul Gallico books too. Well, that's all I have for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I would love to know if you've read any of these books. I would love to know if you have read Thomasina. What did you think of Paul Gallico's novel? Has anyone watched the Disney movie? And if so, what did you think of that? How would you characterize the movie? What would you say are the major themes in it? Do talk to me down in the comments below. This time around, I didn't solicit comments in advance, but I do hope some of you had a chance to read it, because honestly, I may be reading this every year from now on. Let's put it that way. It was that good. So yeah, have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.